We begin the day with taking the finger off the trigger. Today, the High Court in Britain ruled it is not the Prime Minister who has the power to start the country's exit from the European Union. Prime Minister Theresa May, no, you may not order the beginning of Brexit. Well, this evening, the government has confirmed that it will appeal to the Supreme Court. Justices will decide who may finally trigger that infamous Article 50, which opens the door for a state to end its EU membership. Now, this is about a lot more than who gets to say, on your mark, get set, go. It's about the reach of political power via a referendum. Should it be allowed to overtake Parliament's authority to legislate? And at the end of the day, who is really ruling Britain? We begin in London.
It's a major blow to the British government. The question before the High Court, who is allowed to trigger Brexit? And the answer was clear: Parliament. Gina Miller, one of the lead claimants in the case, says it was about process, not politics. Delighted with her victory, she told reporters the ruling confirmed the sovereignty of the British Parliament.
The judgment, I hope, when it's read by the government and they contemplate the full judgment, that they will make the wise decision of not appealing, but pressing forwards and having a proper debate in our sovereign parliament, our mother of all parliaments that we are so admired for around the world. Thank you.
An extraordinary ruling that's thrown Theresa May's Brexit plans into disarray. She had wanted to begin the divorce proceedings by March. Those plans have now been brought to a screeching halt. The government announced immediately it would appeal the decision.
The government is determined to respect the result of the referendum. This judgment raises important and complex matters of law, and it's right that we consider it carefully before deciding how to proceed.
Right now, it's unclear just how much disruption the ruling will cause. Britain's Supreme Court is set to hear the government's appeal in December. A defeat there could set the stage for months of parliamentary gridlock.
All right, let's take a look at how social media has been responding to the Brexit ruling. Tweeter L. Lewis Roy writes, "Everyone's arguing that Brexit was chosen through an unbinding referendum, but referendum turnout was higher than the general election." Good point. User Matt Davies thinks that there's a bias here. He tweeted, "An EU supporting judge has just told MPs that they can veto the people's decision if they want. Let that sink in, folks. Brexit or bust." Labour Member of Parliament Owen Smith writes, "Government must now spell out a vision of post-Brexit Britain before Article 50 is triggered by members of Parliament." He then stresses, "Brexit means Brexit is not good enough." And Twitter user Emperor Kylo writes, "Democracy is dead. I'm disgusted. The people voted to leave, and in the photo that he has attached, it says out is out. No referendum or compromises, adding that Britain is free and there is no going back." Well, David Charter joins me now. He's author of the book, Europe, In or Out. It's the Bible on Brexit, if you will. We never thought we'd be sitting here talking about, the future of Brexit being in question, did we?
We did not. I mean, it's not a huge surprise, I have to say, that I do think on balance, the judges have what they've said is remind people that Britain is a parliamentary democracy. That means that Parliament is sovereign. It's a reminder that the referendum was an advisory referendum. Now, there was a massive turnout and there was a big vote to leave the European Union. But I think what is causing a lot of the concern and the confusion is that Britain does not have very many referendums and people don't know exactly how these things should play out, which is why it's ended up in the courts, because there isn't really a rule book.
And we run into people all the time still that if we remind them that the referendum was an advisory referendum, they're shocked. They think that a referendum has the same power as legislation that's passed into law.
That's absolutely right. And what it means now is that Theresa May must consult Parliament. That means if the government's appeal against this fails, she must bring an Act of Parliament, which will need to go through not just the Commons, where she has a majority of 12, very, very small, and we know most of the MPs in their hearts want to remain in the European Union, also through the House of Lords, where there is a majority also for staying in the European Union. But I wouldn't expect a massive rebellion against the government to block the triggering of Article 50. What it will be used for is to get much more information out of the government and to try and nail down the negotiating stance of the government so everyone can see what it's trying to do.
This was not a surprise, which means David Cameron had to know when he said years ago that this type of referendum was coming. Theresa May knows as well. If you want to believe in, conspiracies, you could say that it all looks incredibly well planned.
It's not incredibly well planned. I don't believe the conspiracy theory. I think that the country at the moment is in a state of some chaos. You can see, by the way, the pound, for example, the exchange rate is fluctuating, falling like a stone one day and then picking up today on this news. Britain is a parliamentary democracy, and the judges have reaffirmed that Parliament must have a say in this process.
So what do you think then the Supreme Court is going to do?
The Supreme Court will, I'm pretty certain, will support the High Court. That decision won't be known until January, which means it will completely disrupt Theresa May's timetable. She wanted to declare Article 50, which is the formal way of saying you want to leave the European Union. She wanted to do it by the end of March. That now is really out of the window. That causes two terrific electoral problems.
Well, explain, why is that out of the window? For our international viewers, why is it not possible in the span of 2 months to get both houses of Parliament to vote on one thing?
It's too short a time frame, in most people's view, to get an Act of Parliament through both houses when we know that Act of Parliament will be subject to some very hostile amendments.
Yeah, but they've had how long? I mean, for the past year, Britain has been consumed with this one topic.
Well, since June the 23rd, when we voted to leave, that's true. There may have been some foot dragging on the process of triggering Article 50. But what it now means is that instead of being completed by early 2019, because it's a 2-year process, the negotiating to leave the EU, it could now run into 2020, which is an election year in Britain, which means that the general election could become a rerun of the referendum to leave the EU.
And could we actually see, if this happens, could we see someone from Labour run on keeping the country in the EU? I mean, all of this has been much ado about nothing?
That is really the fantastically big question that is yet to come, because Jeremy Corbyn so far seems to be going along with the will of the people as expressed in the referendum. And it will probably be, at the moment, electoral suicide for a party leader or an MP, especially in a constituency which voted to leave, to say, actually, no, I'm going to try and force the Remain on the country. So nobody's saying that at the moment, but I can see where you're going with this one, Brent. It's coming down the line towards us is a potential second referendum.
There were reports today that advisors to the German Chancellor and maybe even to the French President have been saying, now you should do all you can to make Britain stay in the EU. Don't facilitate Brexit, drag your feet because of 2020. Also,
it could mean that we have very, very tough negotiations, as you say, with the European partners who are unwilling to give anything like a good deal, a really tough deal, in fact. And I don't think they will want to drag their heels because, there's a wider European picture here. It's bad for the euro and the Eurozone to have chaos on your border as well from Britain.
That's right. It's bad for everybody, and it's like if it's not chaos on this side of the Atlantic, it feels like chaos on the other side. David Charter, as always, thanks for coming in. We appreciate your insights, and I have a feeling we'll see you sooner rather than later. Thank you.